Good morning. I'm Barry Bryson. Thank you for joining me for another 5 good minutes with the Word. We're continuing our study of the life and letters of the Apostle Paul, and we're finishing chapter 3 today. Yesterday, we read those passages where he really got down to the nitty-gritty of being persecuted, about being interrogated, about being falsely charged in front of the court. And he told them that if you're going to do this, you're going to have to not change your behavior. Don't change your tactics. If you're treated fairly or unfairly, you act the same. You're respectful, you're reverent, and you don't back down. And you're not afraid. You're going to stand your ground, but you're not going to hit back. And you're going to say, that's what Jesus did, and that's what you need to do too. Today, he ends the chapter by talking to us about the victory of Jesus, the victory that we share. And I'm going to go back to verse 18, because that's the beginning of the sentence, even though we kind of cut that sentence in half yesterday. For Christ also died for sins once for all, the just for the unjust, in order that he might bring us to God, having been put to death in the flesh and made alive in the spirit, in whom he also went and made proclamation to spirits who are in prison, and I should say now, who are in prison now, who once, in the past, were disobedient when the patience of God kept waiting in the days of Noah, during the construction of the ark, in which a few, that is 8 persons, were brought safely through the water. And corresponding to that, baptism saves you now. Not the removal of dirt from the flesh, but an appeal to God for a good conscience through the resurrection of Jesus Christ, who is at the right hand of God, having gone into heaven, after angels and authorities and powers had been subjected to him. Don't forget who's in charge. Jesus has been given all power in heaven and on earth. He heard that with his own ears, Matthew chapter 18, right? Or 28, verses 18 through 20. He's saying Jesus suffered and died for us, not so that he could be relegated to a prisoner's grave, but so that he could be in charge of everything, so that he could be given all power in heaven and on earth. And we're sharing in that power right now, and we're as we share in that suffering right now. He uses the phrase once for all. I wanted to mention that because it's a phrase that Jude will use. It's a phrase that Peter uses, and it speaks to the finality of the act of God's work in Jesus. In other words, there's not something waiting later on. I mean, nobody has to be sent to talk to the mound builders. Okay, this is happening once for all, and it happens in Jesus Christ. I also want to notice that he gets us to the building of the ark, and this is where so many denominational people want to take this and twist it to mean something that it absolutely does not mean. The ark is a seminal event in Peter's thinking, something that applies to what's about to happen to them. During the days of the ark, every thought and intent of a person's heart was only on violence and evil, and it had to seem that way to Christians living in the Roman Empire. And God provided deliverance, even though there were only 8 people that were righteous. And those souls, and this is in the Greek text, the souls that were preached to are in prison now. The preaching took place when they were alive. Now they're in the prison of Hades. But while they were alive, they heard the truth, God's truth. Jesus, the Son of God's own voice, preached to them through Noah. And so they have no excuse. They were given the word. Now they're in prison, the prison of Hades, and the reality of a re-embodied existence in hell has not happened to them yet. But now they know. They know the truth of what was preached to them when they were alive, and now they're stuck. The way the rich man is stuck in the story of the rich man and Lazarus. He's going to revisit the ark not as a symbol of salvation and God's deliverance, but as a symbol of God's judgment, which of course it's both in both places, but here the salvation is emphasized. Salvation by what medium? By water. Water that came in sufficient amounts that it was high enough for the highest mountain that the ark could float and not find wreck, on the mountaintops of the earth. In the same way, baptism saves you now. Past, present, and future have to be kept track of in this passage. Right now, you're saved because you've been baptized. Why were you baptized? Not the way the Jews baptized proselytes. It's not to wash the Gentiles off. It's about the sin inside of you and being right before God morally. And when you're that way, you belong in the kingdom of God. You're a child of God through Jesus Christ. And Jesus Christ is the right hand of God, reigning, because all power has been given to him. And you belong to him. And don't forget that. Important words for us today. And let's not forget them. Okay. The sufferings of Christ will lead him to his next therefore in chapter 4, which we'll pick up with tomorrow. Thank you for joining me for another 5 good minutes with the Word.